Rowan Chen had been sleeping in her car for 8 months, working double shifts as a maid, when she stumbled into a Mafia boss's penthouse bleeding and broken, and unknowingly saved his life by rescuing his daughter from a deadly fever. What she did not know was that Rafael Romano never forgot a debt, and the moment she cradled his sick child through the night, she became the answer to a question he never knew how to ask. Miami's summer rain hammered the penthouse windows like bullets, lightning splitting the bruised sky every few seconds, turning the city below into a blur of neon bleeding across wet asphalt. At 2:41 in the morning, Rowan Chen stumbled through the service entrance of the Romano penthouse, her entire body shaking. She was 32 years old but looked decades older, her left eye swollen completely shut, the skin around it deep purple and black like rotting fruit. Purple handprints, still fresh and livid, wrapped around her throat in a perfect map of violence. Her maid uniform hung torn at the shoulder, revealing more bruises beneath, and blood trickled from her split lip down her chin. Her clothes were soaked through, clinging to her frame like a second skin. In her trembling hand, she gripped a backpack containing everything she owned in the world. The penthouse door had been left cracked open by a delivery driver hours earlier. Rowan hadn't thought about consequences. She had only thought about survival. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, moving toward her through the darkness. Rafael Romano appeared in the hallway in black silk pajama pants, his chest bare, his dark eyes sharp and lethal. He was 38 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, with the kind of build that came from years of controlled violence, broad shoulders, narrow hips, muscles that moved like machinery beneath bronze skin. His dark hair was disheveled from sleep. A silver scar ran from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone, a reminder of a betrayal he never discussed. In his right hand, he held a gun, small and efficient, raised with the casual expertise of a man who had pointed weapons at people for half his life. He saw the broken woman in his hallway and registered nothing but threat. "Who are you?" His voice was deep and solid like an oath, each word carefully placed. "You have 5 seconds. But before Rowan could speak, before she could explain or beg or do anything at all, a sound pierced through the penthouse that stopped time itself. A child's cry. Fevered. Delirious. Desperate. "Daddy? Daddy, it hurts." Rowan's head whipped toward the sound with the speed of pure instinct. She did not think. She moved. She pushed past Rafael without seeing his face clearly through her one good eye, following the voice down the hallway to a bedroom painted pale blue with stars on the ceiling. And there, on a bed far too large for her small frame, lay Lily Romano, age 6, burning with fever. The child's skin was the color of old paper. Sweat soaked through her pink pajamas. Her body trembled with chills that racked through her like electrical current. Her dark eyes, so much like her father's, were glassy and unfocused. The thermometer on the nightstand read 104.3 degrees. Rowan dropped her backpack without hesitation. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency despite her injuries, muscle memory overriding everything else. She scooped the child up, felt the furnace of fever radiating from Lily's small body, and carried her to the bathroom. She turned on the bathtub faucet, tested the water temperature with her forearm, lukewarm, not cold, never shocking the system, and lowered the child into the water. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay." "I know it's scary," Rowan whispered, her voice trembling like a candle in the wind. "The fever is just your body fighting. We're going to help it fight." Rafael stood in the doorway, gun lowering to his side. For 15 years, he had built an empire. For 15 years, he had made decisions that cost lives. For 15 years, he had been untouchable, unreachable, a man carved from stone and venom. And now he stood watching a stranger, a woman with her throat bruised black from violence, tend his daughter with a gentleness that made something inside his chest crack open like an egg. He did not move. He did not speak. He just stood there. Through that endless night, Rowan sat on the cold bathroom tile floor, keeping Lily in the water, changing it every 20 minutes as it warmed. She sang softly in Mandarin, a lullaby her own mother had sung to her decades ago. The song was about a moon watching over a small child, about safety that never came, but the melody was pure and clear. She pressed cool cloths to Lily's forehead. She whispered encouragement each time the child whimpered. Every few minutes, she checked the thermometer. 104. 103.8. 103.5. Rafael retreated to the hallway but did not leave. He leaned against the wall outside the bathroom, listening to this broken stranger sing to his daughter. Marco and Franco, his two closest lieutenants, emerged from the guest quarters at 4 a.m., weapons drawn. "Sir, there's an intruder," Franco began. Rafael raised his hand. Silence swallowed the room. The only sound was Rowan's voice, singing in a language neither man understood, and the soft lap of water as she changed the child's bath. "Stand down," Rafael said quietly. "She is not a threat." Marco and Franco exchanged a look neither had seen in 15 years. In 15 years, they had never seen him sit beside anyone like this. In 15 years, they had never heard him speak with anything approaching gentleness about anyone but his daughter. By 6:44 in the morning, as the first light crept across Miami's skyline, Lily's fever finally broke. She curled into Rowan's lap, her small body finally still, her breathing finally even. She whispered, "The nice lady." "The nice lady sang to me." Rowan's head dropped back against the bathroom tile. Her entire body began to shake, not from cold, but from the release of 8 months of tension, of fear, of holding herself together by sheer force of will. Tears cut through the dried blood on her face, leaving clean tracks down her cheeks. She held this small child who was not hers and let herself cry like she had not cried since her life first shattered. Rafael appeared in the doorway, still shirtless, still carrying his gun. He looked at this woman, beaten nearly unconscious, her clothing torn, her body marked with violence, holding his child with more tenderness than he had ever witnessed. She had not asked his name. She had not asked what he could do for her. She had simply seen his child in danger and answered that danger with everything she had left. He set the gun on the counter. "Thank you," he said quietly. Rowan's head lifted. She saw him for the first time, truly saw him, and her eye that could still open widened. This was not just a wealthy man. This was a powerful man. Everything about him radiated control and danger in equal measure. The scar on his face, the way his eyes moved, the absolute stillness of his body, these were the marks of someone accustomed to violence. She tried to speak, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Your daughter." She was burning. I couldn't." "I know," Rafael said. He crossed the bathroom and knelt beside them. For the first time in many years, he knelt. He looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully now against Rowan's chest, and then he looked at the woman holding her. "What is your name?" "Rowan." "Rowan Chen." "I am Rafael Romano. And I owe you a debt that I do not take lightly." It was at that moment, as Rafael Romano spoke those words, that a piece of paper fell from Rowan's jacket pocket. It fluttered to the bathroom tile and landed face up. The words were stamped in aggressive red letters across the top, "Final Notice." Below that, a number that seemed to mock everything, $150,000. And below that, a countdown, payment due in 3 days or foreclosure proceedings begin. Rafael picked it up slowly. He read every word. His jaw tightened. The scar on his face seemed to deepen with shadows. But what Rafael Romano did not know, what no one in his violent, carefully constructed world knew, was that this woman had just done something unprecedented. She had chosen someone else's child over her own survival. She had walked into a stranger's home, bleeding and broken, and spent an entire night fighting death on behalf of a child that was not hers. And Rafael Romano, a man who had built his empire on the principle that loyalty is currency and mercy is a luxury reserved only for the strong, had just met the person who would transform everything he believed about power. Now, let us go back to the beginning, to 8 months earlier, when Rowan Chen's life shattered into pieces she is still trying to gather. 8 months earlier, Rowan Chen stood in a kitchen that smelled like stale coffee and broken promises, watching her ex-boyfriend Derek Collins raise his fist above her laptop. The device sat on the counter between them like a condemned thing. Derek's face was the color of raw meat, veins bulging from his neck, spit flying from his mouth as he screamed about shame, about how she had embarrassed him in front of his boss, about how she was a worthless, ungrateful disaster of a human being. His voice didn't sound like words anymore. It sounded like violence with a voice. "You talked to him," Derek screamed. "You went out of your way to talk to him like you were somebody. Like you belonged in that room." Rowan's hands were trembling. She was trembling. Behind her, Emma and Max huddled together by the refrigerator, their small bodies pressed against the cold white metal like they could disappear into it if they pushed hard enough. Emma was 7 years old. Max was 5. Both of them had learned to make themselves smaller when Derek was in this state. "Derek, please," Rowan whispered. "The children are here." "Don't tell me what to do," he said, and then he brought the laptop down against the counter's edge. The screen shattered. Sparks died in the air. Whatever files she had saved there, whatever freelance work she was trying to do to earn extra money, whatever small digital version of hope she had been building, it was gone. His fist came next. It connected with her ribs, just below her left breast. Air left her body like it had been stolen. Pain bloomed in her chest, hot and spreading. She stumbled backward and Derek caught her by the throat, his fingers pressing into the delicate places where her pulse lived. His thumb found the hollow there, and he squeezed. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't speak. She could only see Emma's face, twisted with terror, and hear Max making small animal sounds from under the kitchen table. "I own you," Derek said, his breath hot against her ear. "Everything you do, everywhere you go, I will know. You belong to me. You will always belong to me." He released her. She fell to her knees, gasping, her hand at her throat where his fingers had left their signature in the form of pressure and pain. Emma was screaming now, a thin sound like breaking glass. Rowan reached for her children and pulled them close, their small bodies shaking against hers, and somewhere in her mind she made a decision that she would spend the next 8 months running from. She called 911 while Derek was still in the apartment, while the children were still crying, while her voice was still shattered and barely a whisper through her bruised throat. The police arrived at 8:02 in the evening. 2 officers in pressed uniforms stepped out of their car with their hands resting on their belts. Officer Daniels was tall, with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much. Officer Torres was younger, newer, with the kind of eagerness that suggested he still believed the job was about justice. They took one look at Derek Collins and everything changed. "Derek," Officer Daniels said, nodding like they were old friends. "What's happening here?" Derek straightened his shirt, wiping his mouth. "Domestic disagreement. My girlfriend had a little too much to drink and got emotional. It's handled." Officer Daniels turned to Rowan. "Have you been drinking tonight?" Rowan's throat was on fire. Speaking felt like swallowing broken glass. "He attacked me. In front of my children. Please, I need." "She's overreacting," Derek said smoothly. "She always does this. Gets a few drinks in her and starts these accusations." Officer Torres looked at Rowan's throat, at the handprints that were already darkening into bruises. He looked at her face, at the swelling around her left eye. But then he looked at Derek, and Rowan saw something shift in his expression. Recognition. Understanding. "Look," Officer Daniels said, "we can file a report, but without witnesses outside the family, and with no signs of weapon use, the prosecutor probably won't move on it anyway. You sure you want to go through all that?" Rowan's voice came out broken. "Yes. Yes, I'm sure. They took a report. They took photographs." Officer Torres's jaw was clenched the entire time, and she could see the conflict in his eyes, the knowledge that something was deeply wrong here and his powerlessness to fix it. When they left 15 minutes later, Derek was still standing in her living room, still smiling. "You can't hide from me," he whispered as the police car pulled away from the curb. "I know every corner of this city. Every place you could go, every person who might help you. I will find you. The next morning, Rowan sat in an examination room at Miami General Hospital while Dr. Patel, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and surgical hands, took x-rays of her ribs. 2 were cracked. 1 was nearly broken. The bruising on your throat is consistent with strangulation, Dr. Patel said quietly, her voice carrying a weight of recognition. If you want to file a formal medical report, we can do that. Rowan showed her the police report from the previous night. Marked unfounded. Dr. Patel's face hardened, but she said nothing. They both knew what that stamp meant. It meant no one was coming to help. It meant the system had already decided whose side it was on. There are resources, Dr. Patel said. Shelters, support groups, legal aid. I can't, Rowan said. I can't go to a shelter. I have 2 children. I can't put their names on a list. I can't risk him finding them. The doctor wrote something on a piece of paper and handed it to her. Call this number. They can help you disappear. 3 days later, Rowan sat at her kitchen table with every bill she possessed spread out in front of her like cards in a game she was losing. Rent was $1,400. The hospital bill from the ER visit was $2,300. Childcare was $800. Her job at Ocean View Hotel as a maid paid $13 an hour, and she worked 6 days a week, roughly 40 hours. Her weekend shifts at Rosario's diner paid $9 an hour plus tips, and the tips were usually measured in dollars, not tens of dollars. Total monthly income, $2,100. Total monthly expenses, $2,700. She was $600 short every month. Every single month, she was short. And then the letter arrived. An eviction notice stamped with the kind of official seal that left no room for negotiation. 30 days. That was all she had. The landlord claimed he was selling the building, which was true. The rent was going up to $1,900, which Rowan couldn't pay. She read the notice 3 times, her mind refusing to process the words as real. That night, she began packing. Emma and Max helped her stuff garbage bags with clothes and toys and the few things they owned. Rowan told them they were going on an adventure. Max believed her and was excited about it. Emma, who was 7 and already learning how the world worked, looked at her mother's face and said nothing, but her small hands moved mechanically through the motions of packing, and Rowan knew her daughter understood more than a child should have to understand. By midnight, everything they owned fit into Rowan's 2003 Honda Civic. The back seat was full of garbage bags. The children slept under donated blankets that smelled like a laundromat and strangers' houses. Rowan sat in the driver's seat with her hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at her phone. The screen glowed with numbers that meant nothing and everything at once, $427 in her checking account. And in her wallet, hidden away like a secret, $78. That was all the cash she had. That was her entire wealth, her entire safety net, her entire ability to keep her children fed for the next week. Rain began to fall, tapping against the windshield in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. The 7-11's neon sign flickered and buzzed outside the car, casting everything in a sickly green light. Rowan pulled a piece of paper from the passenger seat. A debt collector's letter, stamped in aggressive red letters across the top, final notice. The debt belonged to her late husband, Marcus. He had died 3 years ago from a heart attack he couldn't afford to treat when he first felt the symptoms. The medical bills had come after. $150,000 in total medical debt that the hospital insisted she was liable for, even though she had nothing. Even though she had lost the person she loved most in the world. Payment due in 3 days or foreclosure proceedings will begin immediately. She had already lost so much. Her home was gone. Her marriage was ashes. Her job was survival. Her children were learning to be afraid of the dark because they associated it with danger. And this debt, this impossible debt, was hanging over her like a blade that had already cut her open. Thunder cracked across the sky, splitting it open. Rowan closed her eyes. She didn't pray anymore. Her prayers had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus between Jacksonville and Miami. She just sat there in the dark, listening to the rain, listening to Emma and Max breathing in the back seat, listening to the sound of her own heart breaking in pieces. She had $78 to her name. She had $78 to survive the next week. Maybe the next 10 days if she rationed carefully. After that, there was nothing. No plan. No backup. No miracles. She didn't know that miracles were already in motion. She didn't know that a man named Rafael Romano was sitting in a penthouse 17 miles away, watching his daughter Lily burn with fever, desperate and alone in his power. She didn't know that in less than 8 hours, she would walk into the rain and stumble through a door that would change everything. All she knew was that the rain kept falling, and it showed no signs of stopping. The rain fell like a blade wrapped in ice, and Rowan Chen sat frozen in the driver's seat of her 2008 Honda Civic, a letter trembling in her hands. The paper was official. Stamped. Final. Child Protective Services would conduct a home visit in 72 hours to assess living conditions. Rowan had no home. She had a car. A car with $78 in her wallet and 2 sleeping children in the back seat. She closed her eyes. The letter crinkled in her grip. Across the city, 17 miles away, in a penthouse that overlooked Biscayne Bay like a throne overlooking a kingdom, Rafael Romano stood in his daughter's doorway watching her burn with fever. Lily was 7 years old. She had a mother once. That mother had left when Lily was 3, walking out of their lives like they were nothing, like the years meant nothing, like the love meant nothing. Rafael had built an empire after that. An empire of silence and control and men who understood that mercy was a luxury and loyalty was currency. He had built it all to protect Lily. But tonight, as he watched his daughter thrash against sheets soaked with sweat, his empire felt like nothing. His money could not break the fever. His power could not soothe her terror. She called for her mother. She called for someone, anyone, to stay. Rafael sat beside her bed in the darkness. He placed a cool cloth on her forehead. He whispered things he had not whispered in years. And then he waited, helpless, like a man soothing a lost child when he had no idea what lost children needed. 8 hours earlier, Rowan Chen had finished her second shift at the Ocean View Hotel. Her supervisor, Ms. Chen, no relation, had asked her again if everything was okay. Rowan had smiled that smile, the bright and brittle one that fooled nobody but everyone pretended to believe. She had worked the day shift cleaning rooms from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Rooms 204, 206, 208, 210, 214. Rich people stayed in these rooms. They left hair in the shower drains. They left makeup on the towels. They left money on the nightstand sometimes, $5, $10 if she was lucky. Today she had found $17 total across 5 rooms. $17. Combined with the $61 she'd made on tips from the restaurant where she'd worked the evening shift, starting at 5 p.m., ending at midnight, she had made $78. Exactly $78. It would stretch to cover gas, food for the children, and perhaps one night at a motel if she rationed perfectly. The CPS letter sat on the passenger seat. She had read it 8 times. The language was clinical. Living in a vehicle constitutes inadequate shelter. Lack of permanent address indicates instability. The presence of 2 minors in such conditions raises serious welfare concerns. They had given her 72 hours to produce a home address and stable living situation. She did not have 72 hours. She did not have $72. She had $78 and a prayer that had long since evaporated somewhere between Jacksonville and Miami. The rain intensified. It hammered the windshield like it was trying to break through. Rowan pulled out of the parking lot and drove with no destination, just movement, just the sound of her children breathing, just the metronome of the wipers cutting back and forth across the glass. She circled through neighborhood after neighborhood, rotating locations so no one would notice. Behind a furniture store on 8th Street. Behind a closed dental office on 11th. Tonight she chose an industrial area near the port, empty parking lots and warehouses and places where security cameras pointed at cargo containers instead of abandoned vehicles. She parked. She climbed into the back seat and stretched out beside Emma, and maximum Emma was 10. Max was 7. They had learned to sleep anywhere. They had learned to ask no questions. They had learned that their mother's smile was a way of lying. Outside, the rain continued its assault. Meanwhile, in his penthouse, Rafael had made a decision. He would call his personal driver, Marco. Marco had worked for him for 15 years. Marco understood loyalty. Marco understood that when the boss said move, you moved without asking why. Rafael said, I need the best physician in Miami here in 20 minutes. And I need a woman's presence. My daughter needs, he stopped. What did his daughter need? A mother? Comfort? Someone who did not smell of expensive cologne and blood? Someone, he finished. I need someone to help her. The fever climbed. By midnight, Lily's temperature reached 104.2 degrees. Her small body shook. Her eyes moved beneath closed lids like she was running through nightmares. Rafael sat beside her, his $700 suit jacket discarded, his white shirt rolled up to the elbows, and he felt something he had not felt in years. He felt afraid. He felt small. He felt like a man whose money and power were exactly as useful as a gun against the tide. The storm outside grew darker. The wind came off the bay and shook the windows like it wanted inside. Rowan drove without direction at 1 in the morning. Her gas tank was at a quarter full. She needed to preserve it. She turned toward the neighborhoods where hotels existed, where storm water drained toward the bay, where the rich lived behind glass and the poor slept in cars. The driving rain made visibility impossible. She could barely see the road. Emma and Max were awake now, frightened by the violence of the weather. Emma asked if they would be okay. Rowan said yes. She said it the way she said everything lately, bright and brittle and completely untrue. She took a turn too fast. Her back tire hit a section where a fire hydrant had corroded through the street, creating a sudden drop. The car lurched. She overcorrected. For one moment that felt like an eternity, she thought they would flip. Instead, the car slid sideways and came to rest against the curb. Rowan's heart hammered. Emma's face was white. Max was crying. We're okay, Rowan said. We're okay. We're okay. She tried to restart the car. The engine turned over once, twice, then nothing. The battery light flared red on the dashboard. She tried again. Nothing but the sound of the starter grinding, refusing. The car had finally given up. It had carried them for 8 months. It had been her home and her prison and her last desperate measure. Now it was a broken thing in the rain. Rowan sat there. She did not cry. She had learned not to cry. Tears were a luxury. Instead, she looked at her children's terrified faces and she looked out at the storm and she made a decision. She would walk. The bay was 1 mile that direction. The Ocean View Hotel was 2 miles that direction. The penthouse district was 3 miles north, where the mansion sat behind iron gates, and the rain probably felt different when you had a roof that cost more than her entire life. She grabbed her backpack. She told Emma and Max to put their jackets on. She took them by the hand and she stepped into the rain. The wind tore at them like teeth. The rain came sideways. Rowan had no destination, only direction. She walked because stopping meant sitting with the truth. The truth was simple: they would die. Not tonight. But soon. The CPS would take them. Or Derek would find them. Or the money would run out completely, down to zero, down to nothing, and she would have to make a choice between feeding her children and keeping a roof over their heads, and there was no answer to that choice except the kind that ended in tragedy. She walked. Lightning split the sky. In that flash of white light, she saw something. A building rising above the others. Glass. Lights inside still burning at 2 in the morning. Movement behind the glass. People. Warmth. She walked toward it. The building was impossibly tall. The lobby was impossible. Marble and chrome and flowers in vases that probably cost more than her car. A security guard sat behind a desk. He was already reaching for his phone to call the police. Rowan looked like a vagrant. Soaking wet. Wild-eyed. Desperate. She looked like danger and threat and the kind of person you had security guards to prevent from entering. But before the guard could move, the elevator doors opened. And a man stepped out. He was tall. 6'2" at least. Dark hair just starting to silver at the temples. A scar that ran from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone like someone had once tried to cut out that part of him and failed. He wore a black suit that cost more than everything Rowan owned. He moved like someone who had trained his body into a weapon and forgotten how to untrain it. He looked at Rowan. At her swollen eye, and not from the rain, but from Derek's fist 2 days ago. At the handprints on her throat that had faded to yellow and purple. At the 2 children clinging to her like she was the only solid thing in a drowning world. Rafael Romano, at that exact moment, had left his daughter's side for 30 seconds because the fever had spiked past 105 degrees and his doctor was saying words like infection and hospital. He had stepped into the elevator to call his men, to prepare to move Lily to a private medical facility. The doors had opened on the lobby level, and he had stepped out directly into his life changing. "Where are you going?" he said. His voice was deep. Solid like an oath. "I don't know," Rowan said. And then, because she had nothing left to lose, "My daughter is very sick. I was looking for shelter from the storm." Rafael did not know her name yet. He did not know that this woman had just stumbled through his front door soaking wet and broken and desperate. He did not know that in the next 8 hours, she would save his daughter's life by doing something simple. She would stay. She would sit beside Lily and she would place cool cloths on the fever and she would sing softly when the child cried out in the darkness, and she would not leave, and she would not demand payment, and she would simply be there. But in this moment, Rafael only knew one thing: his daughter was burning up 17 floors above him, and this woman's eyes held something his money could not buy. This woman's eyes held the kind of love that stayed. "Come," he said. The word was an order. But it sounded like salvation. Rowan followed him into the elevator. The doors closed. The rain continued outside, but they were no longer in it. The elevator rose. As it climbed, Rowan felt something shift inside her chest. Not hope yet. Hope was too big. But the faintest suggestion that miracles, however impossible, had not completely abandoned her. Behind them, the security guard watched the elevator close. He did nothing. Some things were beyond his authority. Some things belonged to another world entirely. The elevator kept rising. The storm raged on outside, separated from them now by glass and floors and a distance that felt like the difference between death and life. The rain hammered against the penthouse windows like 1,000 fists demanding entry. Victoria Ashford's voice came through Rowan's phone, smooth as poison, each word a small blade. "Rowan, I wanted to give you a heads up. The CPS hearing is in 48 hours. I've provided them with photographs of you living in your car, witness statements from Emma's school about her torn clothes and Max's hunger, and Derek's testimony about your mental instability. You should prepare to say goodbye to your children." Rowan's hand trembled. Her voice came out shattered like glass. "You're lying. I have stable housing now. I have employment." "I have?" Victoria's laugh cut through the phone, sharp and bright. "Housing provided by whom? A mysterious benefactor? The caseworker will love that question. They'll dig. They'll ask who he is, what he does, how you know him. A woman who's been homeless 8 months suddenly living in a penthouse? CPS will wonder if you're trading something for that roof over your head." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Victoria continued, her voice dripping false sympathy. "Derek and I are prepared to offer a solution. You sign over custody to Derek, and we'll drop the CPS involvement. We'll even allow supervised visits. Think of it as mercy." Rowan's voice turned to ice. "I'd rather die." The line went silent. Then Victoria's tone shifted, dropping the mask entirely. "That can be arranged." The phone went dead. Rowan sat motionless, the phone still pressed to her ear. Outside, lightning split the sky. The storm was building. Somewhere in this city, everything was about to break. That night, Rowan drove to pick up Emma and Max from Rafael's penthouse. They had been there for a playdate with Lily while Rowan attended a job training session. The summer thunderstorm rolled across Miami in waves, rain so thick the windshield wipers couldn't keep up. Thunder cracked like gunfire. Lightning turned everything white and terrible. The building's underground garage was nearly empty at 9 p.m. Her footsteps echoed as she walked toward the elevator. The concrete smelled of oil and rain blown in from the storm drains. Her breathing sounded too loud in the silence. She pressed the elevator button. Waited. Derek Collins stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Rowan's heart seized. Her hand moved toward her purse where her phone lived. Derek was faster. He moved like violence itself, his face twisted with something darker than anger. His hand shot out and grabbed her by the hair, yanking her backward with such force her neck wrenched. She screamed, a sound that echoed off the concrete, and died. His other hand clamped over her mouth, choking off sound. He slammed her against the car so hard the breath exploded from her lungs. His face was inches from hers, his breath hot and reeking of whiskey. His eyes held nothing human. "You think you can escape me?" His voice was a growl. "You think some new boyfriend is going to save you?" His fist drove into her stomach. Rowan doubled over, her body convulsing around the impact. Derek hit her again, across the face. Her vision blurred. Copper flooded her mouth. Blood. His hands wrapped around her throat, squeezing. Not angry. Methodical. Clinical. Like he was checking the firmness of fruit at a market. His thumbs pressed into her windpipe. Rowan's hand scrabbled at his grip, her fingernails tearing at his skin. Black spots danced in her vision like dying stars. "I'm going to kill you," he whispered. "And then I'm going to take Emma and Max, and they're going to forget you ever existed. They're going to call Victoria Mama, and you're going to be nothing but a bad dream they forget by morning." Rowan's vision narrowed to a tunnel. The edges of consciousness were slipping away. Then Derek was ripped backward as if by invisible hands. Rafael Romano stood there, having emerged from the elevator silently as smoke. His face was a mask of controlled rage, but it was his eyes that held apocalypse. They were flat, empty, the eyes of a man who had just crossed a line he could not recross. Marco and Franco materialized behind him like shadows given form. They wore dark suits that moved like second skin. They moved like men who knew violence the way other men knew breathing. Derek stumbled backward, his hands still curled into fists. Then he saw who he was facing. His expression shifted through terror to bravado, a mask sliding over panic. "Who the hell are you?" Rafael did not answer. His gaze moved to Rowan, who had collapsed against her car, gasping for air, her hand pressed to her throat. Her fingers came away with blood. Rafael's jaw tightened. Something cold and dangerous stirred in his chest, a thing he thought he had buried years ago under concrete and money and business transactions. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet. Terrifyingly quiet. "Marco. Franco. Take Mr. Collins somewhere quiet. Make sure he understands that there are consequences for touching what is mine." Derek's eyes widened. "You can't. I have friends in the police department. I have connections. I'll..." Raphael's smile appeared like a blade sliding from a sheath. "Your friends are about to have much bigger problems than you." Marco grabbed Derek's arm. Derek tried to pull away, tried to run, but Franco blocked his exit. They moved him toward the back of the garage with efficient, practiced grace. Derek's shouts echoed off the concrete, threats, pleas, curses, then faded as a black SUV pulled up and the doors opened and closed. Then there was only the sound of rain on the garage ventilation shaft, a distant metallic pinging. Rafael turned to Rowan. He approached slowly, giving her time to see that he meant no harm, at least not to her. His hand reached out and tilted her chin up gently, examining her throat. The bruises were already forming, dark purple blooms like flowers growing on her skin. His jaw worked. He said nothing. Some things were too terrible for words. Later that night, after Dr. Morgan had examined Rowan again, new bruises documented, throat strained, emotional shock catalogued in a report that made Rafael's eyes go cold, Rowan sat alone in her small apartment. Emma and Max slept at Rafael's penthouse with Lily and Mrs. Valdez. The rain hammered the windows like it had a personal vendetta. Lightning illuminated the small living room in violent white flashes. She sat on the floor with her back against the couch, her phone in her shaking hands. The CPS hearing was in 36 hours. Derek would testify against her. Victoria had judges in her pocket, social workers who answered her calls, connections woven through every level of bureaucracy. The debt was paid, but the damage was done. 8 months of homelessness documented. Photographs of her children in torn clothes. Witness statements painting her as unstable, as incapable, as unfit. She had $78 left in her wallet. A Mafia boss offering protection, but accepting it might cost her everything anyway. CPS would ask questions she couldn't answer. Who is he? What does he do? How does a homeless woman suddenly move into a penthouse? They would spin stories. They would assume the worst. She would lose Emma and Max. Her hand shook so violently she dropped the phone. It clattered on the hardwood floor and skidded under the couch. The rain sounded like static. Like white noise erasing thought. Rowan's breath came in short gasps. Panic rose in her chest like floodwater. She thought about Emma's face when the social worker came to take them. Max crying for her, reaching his arms out, not understanding why Mama couldn't hold him. Foster homes. Separation. Years of fighting through court she couldn't afford, judges who had already made up their minds. Her hand reached for the bottle of sleeping pills Dr. Morgan had prescribed. Just to stop the shaking. Just to quiet her mind. She unscrewed the cap with trembling fingers. 10 pills spilled into her palm like tiny white stones. She stared at them. Then she heard it, Lily's voice from earlier, crystal clear in her memory as if the child stood beside her in the dark apartment. Mama, stay. Rowan's hand closed around the pills. She threw them across the room. They scattered like dice, rolling under furniture, disappearing into shadow. She put her head in her hands and sobbed, great heaving cries that shook her entire body like she was breaking apart from the inside. But she didn't swallow them. She stayed. The next morning, 6 a.m., Rafael sat in his office with Marco, Franco, and 3 other men. The screens in front of them glowed with information. Everything. Derek Collins's financial records showing embezzlement from the police liaison fund dating back 3 years. Victoria Ashford's real estate deals revealing money laundering, bribery of city officials, falsified environmental reports on properties she'd purchased for $2.3 million and sold for $17 million. Phone records of Victoria calling in favors to CPS supervisors, to judges, to police captains. Video footage from the garage. Audio recordings of Victoria's threats, her laughter, her casual cruelty. Rafael had spent the last 48 hours using every resource, every connection, every piece of leverage he'd built in 20 years running Miami's underworld. His reach was absolute. Marco said, the evidence is solid. FBI is prepared to move. But Victoria's hosting her charity gala tonight at the Fontainebleau. 500 guests. The event is streaming live on 3 platforms. 400,000 followers watching. Rafael's smile was cold as winter. Perfect. The ballroom at the Fontainebleau glittered like a jewelry box turned inside out. Crystal chandeliers cast light like diamonds scattered across marble floors. Miami's elite filled the space, politicians in tuxedos, developers with teeth like tombstones, socialites whose family money went back generations. The summer charity gala for children in need, Victoria Ashford's annual event, the one that made her look like an angel instead of what she was. Victoria stood on the stage in a gold gown that cost more than Rowan made in a year. Her voice was warm, maternal, full of genuine concern. Tonight we celebrate the children who need us most. The forgotten ones. The vulnerable ones. My foundation has helped 127 families this year alone. We believe every child deserves a chance. Derek stood beside her in a tuxedo, his hand possessively on her waist, his smile sharp as broken glass. The event streamed live on 3 platforms. Thousands watched. Then the screens changed. Victoria's speech cut off mid-sentence. On every screen in the ballroom, on the live stream watched by tens of thousands, footage appeared. Victoria on a phone call with a CPS supervisor named Linda Chen. Victoria's voice, dripping false concern, "I can make a donation. $50,000 to your department. Absolutely no strings attached. But if you could expedite the Chen case, if you could move it to the top of the queue, I would be deeply grateful." Linda's response, "I'll see what I can do, Victoria." The footage continued. Victoria in a private conversation with a judge. Victoria laughing, genuine, cruel laughter, "That homeless bitch is finally going to lose her kids. Derek's been painting her as mentally unstable for months. The CPS worker is ours. Once we get custody for Derek, he marries me, and she disappears. Maybe offshore. Maybe permanently." The financial records rolled across the screens. Shell companies. Money movements. Cartel deposits. $200,000 embezzled by Derek from police funds. $3.2 million laundered through Victoria's real estate empire. Then the video from the garage. Derek's hands around Rowan's throat. Her face purple. His words, "I'm going to kill you." The ballroom erupted in chaos. Victoria's face went white, then red. She screamed at the tech booth to cut the feed, but there was no booth, no technician. It was automated, coming from servers Rafael had people in place to control. The footage was already being shared. Thousands of shares. Tens of thousands. The algorithm was working overtime. Derek tried to run. FBI agents in tactical gear flooded into the ballroom from every entrance, moving like water finding cracks. Guests gasped. Phones came out. They were recording everything. The exposure was live. Everyone watching would see the arrest, not a carefully controlled news report an hour later. Agent Martinez approached Victoria, her badge visible. "Victoria Ashford, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, bribery of public officials, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping." Victoria's voice became a shriek. "Do you know who I am? I have lawyers. I have connections." Agent Martinez's smile was thin as a razor. "Your connections just watched you threaten a domestic violence victim on live television. They are not returning your calls." Derek was tackled by 3 agents near the kitchen entrance. He hit the marble floor hard, his face pressed against cold stone. He was sobbing, his body shaking. "Please, please, I'll tell you everything about Victoria, about the money, please." Agent Santos cuffed him with mechanical precision. "Derek Collins, you're under arrest for assault with intent to kill, stalking, embezzlement, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." But Derek didn't remain silent. His voice broke into a wail. "Rowan, tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I love you." But Rowan wasn't there. She was at Rafael's penthouse, watching the live stream with Emma and Max and Lily. When Derek was cuffed, when he hit the floor, when his face was pressed against that cold marble, Emma cheered. Her small voice rang out, "The bad man is in trouble." Max asked, "Is he going to jail forever?" Rowan couldn't speak. She was crying, but not from sadness. From relief so profound it felt like drowning in reverse, like being pulled upward into air after years underwater. Rafael stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. He said nothing. Actions had already spoken everything that needed saying. By morning, every news outlet in Miami was running the story. Victoria Ashford led away in handcuffs from the federal courthouse, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. Her $5 million bail was denied. Flight risk. She was a liability to everyone who'd ever helped her. Those connections dissolved like sugar in water. Her real estate empire was frozen. FBI raids on 4 properties revealed housing discrimination, fraud, and ties to organized crime. Her charity foundation was revealed as a tax shelter, money filtering through donations to herself, to judges, to politicians. Federal charges against Victoria, 15 counts. Money laundering. Conspiracy. Bribery. Attempted kidnapping. Minimum 40 years. Derek Collins was held without bail. His police liaison job was terminated immediately. His former colleagues, the same ones who'd ignored Rowan's reports of abuse, were under investigation for corruption. Derek's assets seized for restitution. His face was everywhere, but not as a detective. As a criminal. Federal charges: assault with intent to kill, stalking, embezzlement, witness intimidation, conspiracy. Minimum 35 years. The news showed him in an orange jumpsuit during his arraignment, trembling like a cornered animal, begging the judge for mercy. Judge Patricia Hernandez denied bail with a voice like thunder. "Mr. Collins, you used your position of public trust to terrorize a vulnerable woman and her children. You strangled her on camera. Bail is denied." Derek collapsed. His attorneys caught him before he fell. Rafael watched the news with Marco beside him. The screen showed Derek being led away, Victoria being processed, the dominoes falling in sequence. Marco said quietly, "Too easy." Rafael's answer was cold as the grave. "No. Death is too easy. Too quick. Too merciful. This way, they live with their destruction every day for decades. They wake up in cells and remember what they had. They eat prison food and remember champagne. They see the bars and remember freedom. That is mercy enough, and far more than they deserve." What Rowan didn't know, what Rafael kept to himself, was that his brother, the one who'd betrayed the family years ago, was in the same federal prison where Victoria and Derek would be processed. Rafael had made one phone call that morning. Just one. A reminder of old debts, of family codes, of the price paid for betrayal. They would understand, in time, what real consequences meant. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The storm had broken. The sky was clearing. The rain fell steady against the penthouse windows as Rowan stood in the kitchen, her hands moving with careful precision, chopping garlic, stirring sauce, the small rituals of a woman who'd spent 8 months eating cold leftovers from dumpsters and now couldn't quite believe she was allowed to cook in a space like this. The kitchen alone was bigger than every apartment she'd ever rented. Stainless steel gleaming under soft lights, marble countertops that cost more than a year of her old wages, and through the open archway, she could hear the children laughing. Emma and Max argued about napkin colors while Lily set the table with the seriousness of someone performing a ceremony. "Miss Rowan says we fold them like triangles because triangles are strong," Lily announced, her small fingers struggling with the fabric. Emma corrected her immediately. She was 7 now and took her role as oldest sibling with absolute gravity. "It's because it looks fancy, Lily. She taught me." Max, at 5, simply followed whatever Emma did, his copycat devotion absolute. These were her children in every way that mattered. And Lily, Rafael's daughter, had stopped calling her by her name 3 weeks ago. "The apartment is yours," Rafael had said, handing her legal papers with a signature from a lawyer whose business card suggested he charged more per hour than Rowan used to make in a month. "Lease in your name. You can stay as long as you want." The penthouse on the 42nd floor with views of Miami spreading out like scattered diamonds, the guest suite converted to a children's room with bunk beds they'd chosen together at a furniture store where the sales clerk's eyes had tracked them like they might steal something. Rowan had felt the old shame rise up, the weight of being poor in a place designed for the wealthy. But Emma had squeezed her hand and said, "Mama, we're allowed to be happy now," and the shame had cracked like something breaking open from the inside. The door chimed as Rafael returned from his business meeting. His suit was Italian wool, charcoal grey, worth more than her entire wardrobe ever had been. The tie hung loose around his neck, his white shirt unbuttoned at the throat, revealing the hard line of his collarbone. 15 years of running an empire had left marks on him that had nothing to do with scars you could see. When he smiled at the moment Lily spotted him, those invisible marks seemed to lift like clouds breaking apart. "Daddy!" Lily launched herself across the room. Rafael caught her effortlessly, scooping her against his chest, but his eyes were on Rowan. They'd been on her for 3 weeks, tracking her movements like she might disappear if he looked away for too long. Like she'd proven she could vanish into thin air, and he wasn't willing to test that theory again. "Miss Rowan made spaghetti," Lily declared. "Is that so?" His voice was deep and solid like an oath. "Then we are very fortunate." Emma approached with the formal bearing of a young diplomat. "Do you want garlic bread?" She made it with real butter and herbs. Rafael set Lily down and knelt slightly to meet Emma at eye level. "I would be honored." He took the garlic bread from her hands like it was an offering of gold. Max thrust his school drawing at him, a rough figure of a man and 3 children under a sun that looked like a yellow blob with spikes radiating outward. "That is magnificent. Is this us?" He looked at Rowan when he asked, and she felt something dangerous and tender bloom in her chest. "That's our family," Max said simply. The silence that followed was the sound of something fundamental shifting, like the ground settling after an earthquake. Rowan watched Rafael study the drawing, his dark eyes tracing every crooked line, every imperfect detail. When he finally looked up, there was something raw in his expression, something that made her understand, in that moment, that this man who commanded armies and ran empires was choosing to be vulnerable in front of 4 people. In front of her. They sat at the dining table, a glass surface that reflected the city lights from 42 stories below. Rowan served the spaghetti from the center, Rafael at the head of the table with Lily on one side, Emma and Max on the other. She sat at the opposite end, but it felt like sitting across from the sun itself. The children chatted about school, about the park they'd visited that morning, about a teacher who'd given them gold star stickers. Rafael asked questions. He asked Emma about her math test. He asked Max about his drawings. He asked Lily about her dreams the night before. And he listened, really listened, the way people usually reserve for things that matter. The penthouse door chimed. Marco's voice carried through the entrance. "Boss, we need to brief you on the..." He stopped at the threshold to the dining room, Franco behind him. Both men, suited and serious, froze mid-step like they'd walked into a scene from a different world than the one they inhabited. Marco's eyes catalogued the room, spaghetti plates, children, Rowan clearing dishes with practiced efficiency, Rafael's tie still undone, Lily asleep against his shoulder, Emma and Max sharing a plate of garlic bread and arguing over the last piece. In 15 years, Marco would later tell Franco, he had never seen Rafael Romano look like a man at a family dinner. Had never seen his hands move with gentleness instead of precision. Had never seen the cold fortress of the boss's expression soften into something that resembled peace. "We can come back later, boss," Marco said quietly. Rafael nodded. He didn't stand. He didn't move. He kept his hand on Lily's back, steady and sure, and watched Marco and Franco retreat. When they were gone, he said to the remaining children, "Finish your dinner. Miss Rowan made something special for dessert." Later, after Emma and Max were bathed and tucked into their bunk beds, after Lily was asleep on the couch between them during a movie neither of the younger children was watching, Rafael carried his daughter to her room. His movements were economical, practiced. He'd been doing this alone for 6 years, since Isabel had signed away her rights for $2 million and disappeared like she'd never existed at all. Rowan followed, helping him settle the blankets, straightening the nightlight that cast soft shapes on the walls. When they returned to the living room, Rowan was clearing dishes. The rain had intensified outside, drumming against the windows like thousands of fingers asking to be let in. Rafael said, "You don't have to do that." "I want to." She meant it. Cooking, cleaning, these small rituals of care that had been stolen from her when Derek had made their apartment a place of fear, they felt like reclaiming territory. Like proof that gentleness still existed in her hands. Rafael helped her. They moved through the kitchen in comfortable silence, the kind that only develops between people who've seen each other at their worst and chosen to stay anyway. His hands, scarred and lethal, carefully rinsed plates. Hers, calloused from cleaning hotel rooms and hospital bathrooms, dried them methodically. The domestic mundanity of it felt revolutionary. When she asked, "What happens now?" the question that had been hovering between them like a held breath, Rafael turned to face her. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I've never done this before." "Done what?" "Had something worth more than my empire." The word settled between them like a weight, heavy and true. Rowan looked at this man, dangerous and powerful and completely unguarded in his kitchen, and understood that he meant it. That in some fundamental way, she and the children had become his center of gravity. That the careful architecture of his isolation had cracked the day she stumbled into his penthouse, bleeding and broken. 6 months later, the rain fell again over Miami. But this time Rowan stood in the kitchen of a house, not Rafael's penthouse, but a 2-story home on a quiet street in a neighborhood with good schools and safe sidewalks. Rafael had bought it for them without asking, simply presented her with keys and a deed with her name on it. Emma and Max played in the backyard visible through the window, their laughter sharp and clear. Lily was with them, spending half her time here now, calling it our house with absolute certainty. Rafael stood beside her at the window, his hand finding hers naturally, like they'd been doing this for years instead of months. She laced their fingers together. Emma performed her school concert, standing on stage in a dress they'd picked out together, her voice steady and clear, her eyes finding Rowan in the audience and holding contact through the entire song. Max played soccer, Rafael cheering from the sidelines in a way that made the other fathers look at him twice, this man in his tailored suits, shouting encouragement like his life depended on it. Lily learned to read, her small finger tracing words under Rowan's patient guidance, her voice trembling with pride as she sounded out each syllable. At a charity gala, a real one, designed to help domestic violence survivors, Rowan spoke on a panel about escaping abuse. Her voice was steady. Her hands didn't shake. She talked about the night she'd run into a storm with nothing but the clothes on her back and a desperate prayer. She talked about the unexpected kindness of strangers. She didn't mention Rafael by name, but he sat in the audience, unguarded, his expression revealing everything he usually kept locked away. In the kitchen of the house they shared, with the children sleeping upstairs, Rafael pulled her close. The rain continued outside, steady and eternal. But inside there was warmth spreading through the rooms like something alive, like something growing. "Do you ever regret it?" Rowan asked. "Taking in a homeless woman and her kids?" "Every day I'm grateful you stumbled into my life," Rafael said. "You saved Lily that night. But you saved me too. You reminded me that mercy isn't a weakness. That family isn't a liability. That some people choose others before themselves." They kissed, soft and sure, the kind of kiss that felt like a promise being made for the second time, the kind that tasted like safety and home. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. This story reminds us that judgment is easy, but compassion is rare. Rowan could have kept running. She could have ignored a sick child to save herself. Rafael could have turned her away, could have chosen his fortress over his heart. But they didn't. They chose each other. They chose family. In a world that tells us to protect ourselves first, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is reach out to someone else. The person who looks most broken is sometimes the strongest. The person who seems most dangerous is exactly who we need. If this story touched you, hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that second chances are real, that families are found not just born, that courage comes in unexpected forms. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories that remind us why compassion matters. Drop a comment telling us, have you ever been helped by a stranger? Have you ever been the stranger who helped? After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. We'll see you in the next story. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. Goodbye.